Welcome to Season 2 of Rooted and Reaching, a podcast about startups, entrepreneurs, and innovation in the South Bend Elkhart region of Indiana. I'm Marty Mechtenberg.
And I'm Susan Ford. We're excited to share 16 new stories with you this year, and we're going to get tactical about how entrepreneurs are confronting challenges, building success, and moving our region into the future.
Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Rooted and Reaching, Season 2. We have the great pleasure of interviewing today Griffin Eaton of Juke.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Why don't we just start at the beginning? You've got the Juke vest on,
got the swag,
and you got the swag. We kind of Juke is a funny word. It does bring to mind connotations. Maybe you can tell us where it came from.
Sure. So
and what it is.
Yeah, essentially it's a jukebox for live music. So I didn't have to reach too hard mentally. It was like, jukebox, juke.
Right. What is actually the origin of the word juke? Jukebox. Do we know?
I wish I knew. I know there's a jukebox. I think the first jukebox was invented in San Francisco in like 1892 or something.
Way back.
Probably have to fact check me on that.
Had records in it or something.
At one point, we made a post deep into our Instagram about it.
Okay.
So, and I've since forgotten, but that was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But it's there's a rich history of jukeboxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got the connection of jukeboxes. So what does a modern version look like?
So the modern version of a jukebox is essentially, I think TouchTunes is probably the most well-known company that's out there, but it's a digital jukebox. It's on the wall and Corby's around the corner. And
got it.
The real, like the real avid users will also download the app on their phone.
Okay.
And it's actually their product in many ways. It was part of the inspiration of starting this company because I became kind of a TouchTunes junkie, and I would see how much money people would spend just requesting songs on this digital jukebox all night. I was one of them. And I just thought, why doesn't that exist for live music? And in fact, the original name I was going to use for this was cover tunes. So I could say to artists, well, it's like TouchTunes, but for cover bands.
Right.
And then thankfully I had a small moment of inspiration because cover tunes is not great. Juke and they probably would have sued me.
Yeah, maybe. And Juke sounds pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
And we've since gotten into sports as well. And it kind of fits for sports as well from like a juke move.
Oh, yeah. Oh, interesting.
Which would be serendipity. We haven't used it that way yet.
Yeah. But you can see that, right? Because that is the terminology people use. With TouchTunes, like on a nightly basis, would it keep track of the most popular songs? Is that sort of what you would see when you were an aficionado?
Yeah, you'd see a curated list of music that the venue would pick. So some venues, would eliminate things with explicit lyrics or just different vibes they didn't want to have. So you'd see that. And then you'd see as people would request songs or put songs into the queue, you get to watch the queue build. So you'd see what other people were in. And then you'd see your song right at the next. You'd be like, oh, it's next. This is great.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden another song would jump it in line because someone had fast passed it and put more money down to get in front.
Okay, so you could add a little extra money to the pot and get your song moved up to the top of the queue.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting.
And you could just sort of approximate, wow, this queue has been full all night. And at a certain point, if it's really popular, like every song gets fast passed, which means everybody, instead of putting say 50 cents down for a song, it's been $1.50 or $2 or whatever the price is. And you start doing the math, you're like, every song is like 2.5 minutes. And it's been full for 3 hours.
Right.
Wow, some people are spending some real money.
Right. So I'm curious. I'm just imagining you now sitting at Corby's. Now you maybe weren't at Corby's. Like, were you a student at the time?
When I had the idea for this?
Yeah, like you're sitting there, you're drinking a beer, you're talking to your friends, and you're like, why don't they do this for live music?
Yeah,
how did that happen?
I was sitting up in St. Joe, Michigan, or Benton Harbor, actually, at the Livery.
Okay.
And gentleman was playing in the corner. He was really good, and he was playing all original music.
Okay.
And I just remember thinking I would pay him $100 to play any cover song I've ever heard in my life, just because I was craving the familiar. And I thought he would put an interesting spin on it.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about, man, requesting a song would be fine, be very appropriate in this moment, but it would be like it's hard to do. So I didn't have cash on me.
Yeah.
I didn't know what he played from a cover, like what covers could he do?
Right.
And it's always awkward if you do walk up and request a song, you're like interrupting them.
Sure.
And that was so that was the initial need. Just a very selfish need of like, I need to hear Wonderwall right now. And, but that made me think like, man, there's, this whole touch tunes scene that I'd gotten into. I was like, that's really popular. Yeah. Why doesn't that exist? And I thought back to some of my most memorable show I ever went to was essentially a really small show with Jack Johnson, and it was like 50 people there, and even stop people in the middle. He's like, guys, I screwed up. We got to take from the top. And he was just talking to the audience, and it was really interactive.
Very, very casual,
and just sort of all this sort of washed over me. I was like, why doesn't that? I was like, there's got to be maybe a more conversational or interactive way live music could be. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea, but it surprised.
First of all, it makes sense, and many of the entrepreneurs that we've spoken with on this podcast are basically solving a problem that they had. Like, this is something I missed in my life, or I wish I had in my community, and realized, well, no one else is going to make it. I guess I'll do it. It sounds like something a little bit similar here.
To an that was certainly the inspiration, and then I just took the next step of, well, maybe like something like this exists, and then it didn't, and then I was like, well, do artists care? And I don't know anything about being a musician, and so I started talking to them, and it seemed like there was a need. There was this changing economics with streaming.
Right.
And it's like, well, it looks like a little piece of technology sitting between the artist and the fan could solve both issues for them and issues for fan. And then it was like, well, maybe I could do a test before I build software. And I just took the next step, and I didn't know if anything would ever come of it.
Sure.
At all. I just kept getting convinced by the last thing I did that, okay, it's worth taking the next step.
Right. That step seemed okay. Let's take another one.
Yeah. It was really, really incremental.
So, I mean, did you have partners in doing this? I'm curious. I want to go back. Were you a student at the time? Were you working a different job, and you just started doing this on the side because it was sort of working for you? Yeah,
I'd been, 10 years or so removed from my MBA.
Okay.
And at that point, that was sort of got me the entrepreneurial bug. I thought I'd go back into corporate America. I didn't. I stayed in South Bend and joined a tech startup here called Venly, and I was graduating, and it's a Notre Dame professor and a prominent Notre Dame alumni who were starting it, and they were kind of doing a road show of recruiting folks of like, hey, will you join our company? And so I joined Venly for 3 years. I ended up doing another 2 startups, not founder, but like early stage startups. Sure. One that was based out of San Francisco, but I was still here.
Okay.
And then another one that's part of the Graham Allen family, also here.
Got it.
Ended up going back to Venly, was there for 3 years. And it was during that second Venly stint, to answer your question, was when I was side hustling and doing this. And, and then.
So you were swimming in the waters.
I was
already, for other people.
Yep.
And then you started dabbling on your own with this idea.
Yeah. And I never thought I had no real interest in founding a company or starting a company. It was just, I just became convinced at each step that, it's worth like I said, just take the next step. And then the next step led me to leaving the company.
At what point? What was that moment where you realized, oh, this is a real thing and I could do this?
It was probably coming up on, spring of 21. The software the MVP had been built.
Yeah.
First uses had gone really, really well.
Where did those first uses happen?
Very first show we ever did with the software, and the design thinking, no software prototype also happened. Both happened in the same place at Iron Hand.
Iron Hand. Okay.
Yep. Both with local artists.
So you had befriended some local musicians, and they knew what was going on, and you had convinced them, hey, will you join me on this journey to try this thing out?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. The very first test with no software.
Yeah.
And I said these were the 3 hypotheses. People don't request because they don't have cash.
Yeah.
So I got a Square reader, basically.
Sure.
They don't know what you play, so I got them band to tell me every cover song they know.
Okay.
I printed them out. I put them on the tables.
Oh yeah.
And then third is it's awkward to, go up to the band. So I sat off in the corner and just it was like less intimidating. I guess.
So you were a piece of software.
Yeah, I was a piece of software. And then my favorite thing I think is funny. I grabbed my living room TV. And I put it kind of behind the stage, and I made a Google slide presentation.
Okay.
That kind of looked like what I envisioned the software would look like on a video screen. And I had the artist logo going through. And then as people would make requests, I'd edit the Google slide, and I'd be like, all right, Wonderwall is now in. And Tennessee Whiskey is now in.
Yeah.
And I would just update it real quick, and then it would say current requests, and I'd have the songs in.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you were kind of replicating.
We were replicating the software as much as one could.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What a great lo-fi version for a pre-beta test.
Mm-hmm. And, one story is kind of to that moment if I thought I had something was I thought I'd do 3 or 4 or 5 of these little tests just to see where the success metrics were, basically like what percentage of the audience engages, and then does the artist earn more money, and do they do they like it? And it was evident after that first. It was a Sunday afternoon in Iron Hand, and 3 out of every 4 groups of people that came in requested a song. And there was one particular couple, it was two older couples, and the guy came up to me and he said, oh my God, I can request a song from you? I said, yeah. And then he saw the square reader and he said, and I can tip him with my credit card? And I said, yeah, for sure. And he goes, all right, give me a second. He runs back, he requests 3 songs, comes back, tips $20, goes back to his table. A few minutes go by. One of the songs he tipped was Tennessee Whiskey.
Okay.
Band starts playing. They get up and start dancing.
Okay.
And there's just no way when this couple left the house at noon on a Sunday going to Iron Hand to get some delicious wine, they thought, I'm going to dance.
Right.
I just don't.
You don't think that was
I don't think that happened.
Part
and
of
so
their planning.
Was this really cool moment. I was like, that was neat. And so that was kind of the first, I don't know. I didn't know how it was going to go. And that stood out. Yeah,
for sure. So you pretty quickly then moved into a more serious development phase.
Yeah. At that point, I don't know how to code, so I don't know how to play music. I don't know how to code.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
Naturally, let's start a music tech company. And so I found a buddy of mine. I talked to basically anybody in the area, Michael Wicks and Ryan Krieger, who are around.
Idea Center.
Idea Center folks. I was like, I don't know anything about coding. Here's the idea. Who do I need?
Yeah.
How, do you know anyone? And Ryan said, I got a little time. I can probably knock this out for you. And so he coded our first MVP, and then we launched again at Iron Hand, and that went great. Basically, for 3 hours, every single song that got played was a request through Juke, and I think the band made $300, which is way more than they would have made before. They had a great time, and it was fun. Aaron Perry came up to me and goes, hey, I didn't realize that you are responsible for this. And I was like, oh, yeah, unfortunately, It's
the thing I'm doing.
It's the thing I'm doing. And he was like, I thought this was a national company that they were using. Then I learned it wasn't. I was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that must have felt
it was
inspiring
just
too.
Yeah,
to think
and that whole night was nice.
It was so good that folks were confusing it for a nationally fully rolled out product. Huh?
But I was disappointed because that meant I didn't do the MVP. I didn't basically have our MVP test fast enough. So you should get it out before it's fully. You should be really nervous.
I suppose
the MVP,
so.
In my opinion,
so. So for those first couple tests, the artists obviously knew what was going on. Right? But the audience, did they know in advance when they came in that this was happening? They just went in and this opportunity was put in front of them, and they just started naturally engaging with
it.
Yeah.
Which real simple, basically QR code on the mic stand. And a couple times the artist said, hey, I take requests.
Right. So, I mean, I don't want to make this too chronological, so maybe we'll let's jump ahead a little bit. But so from there, you started growing this thing, and maybe we'll circle back around to some other examples. But at some point, you felt like you had to leave South Bend to keep growing the company. Can you talk to us how did you get to that point, and why did you have to make that decision?
Yeah. So I joined a venture studio out of San Francisco called Platform Venture Studios. And so for the first year after I'd left my job and raised an angel round, mostly of local investors, after about a year, we had some traction. And Jeremy, who runs that, basically said, South Bend's a fine place.
Yeah.
But if you're going to, if you got a music company, you should probably be in Nashville or LA or New York where the industry is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, it makes sense. And so, left sadly. I'd been here 10 years and it was my home. So I left to really I don't come from the music industry.
Sure.
The music industry it's really relationship driven, as a lot of industries are. This one very much so. And so it was just the time to start, and we could kind of get away, if you will, with not being there for the first year or so, because we're really targeting the tail of the artist, the career musician. And we wanted to sort of look around the corner and say, well, what is, if you start moving into ticketed events and with larger artists or touring artists, let's get to where the industry is, to start talking to labels and management companies and agents. Just, again, more customer discovery, just to learn at that point.
So I was listening to a podcast the other day when they were Conan O'Brien was on it, and he was basically describing his entire comedic career as a long con to meet the people that he wanted to meet. So I'm wondering if this whole thing is actually just a long con to meet the writers of Wonderwall.
Yeah. I think there's an argument to be made for that. The coolest person I met so far was, and via Zoom, but was Rob Thomas, and that was a surreal moment and they end up using Juke, and that was a surreal moment of like hearing from their manager, and then I talked to Rob last night. He's going to do it. And I was like, Rob Thomas, okay. I kind of grew up listening to all of them. Like, all right, this is
how
awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there I imagine that there's some limits on audience interaction. Like I was at the All American Rejects concert 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago at Fort Winsfield. Probably a difficult environment to use Juke, although I could be wrong. I don't know.
We're still the challenge. The biggest challenge working with a touring artist thus far is the production, the show, and there's not necessarily flexibility to take a request. And so we've had a handful of artists who've been willing, who've been able to do it, and the biggest shows that we've done have been about 2,500 people, and they actually have taken 3 real requests. The data was fantastic. They basically had 80% of the people participate, which meant they got their email address to build their CRM list.
Sure.
Because they generally don't know who's in front of them.
Sure.
And 2, they earned about $5 per head or per person. Once, because some percentage of the audience said, well, I want to put just like in Touches, like I want to put my finger on the scale.
Right.
And put money. So it was a new revenue stream for them. But they were one-off shows. A couple were big New Year's Eve shows. They want to do something special. And so it works great in those environments, particularly if it can get on the Jumbotron or the video screen. Because that's like that's the golden, because what else are you going to do before the show starts or intermission?
So there's so you could be at the show, there's a Jumbotron up, and before the artist even walks on stage, you have access to their playlist effectively.
Yep. You scan the QR code. Oh, sorry.
No.
You'd scan the QR code, and you basically see then, well, how are they going to invite me to be part of the show? The thing we've mostly been doing is a request maybe for the encore, or one song as part of a set from a small list of songs they'd selected.
That the artist has selected.
Yeah. And but even that is a big undertaking, and we've just had our first touring artist with Live Nation say yes, we're going to do it in every show now, and they're going to incorporate Juke in each one. But the reason it's so and the tour doesn't start for another 3 months, so so that gives us the timing of it, allows us with their creative team to design the production with these different moments of interactivity, of which request is one. Sure. There's also ability to get up on the Jumbotron and some other fun things. But we're sort of opening that, widening the aperture of what else is interactivity at a live event. You can't just be song request. And so we're continuing to learn from our customers about what are other features, particularly ones that don't touch the production.
Yeah. Well, that's super interesting. So you're expanding what Juke can do for the live audience in terms of, not just picking the song anymore, but what's it, being on the Jumbotron?
A couple ones being on the Jumbotron, getting into just posting on the Jumbotron, essentially photos and messages. We're gamifying some of the song selection. We have like a song battle now that's really interactive, and people can see their names as they're flying up on the screen. We're starting to develop some augmented reality moments that are pretty cool. One I think is going to be absolutely awesome. Doesn't touch the production, but gives people a really great piece of content to leave with. But that's also specific to the show and helpful in that moment. And I won't. I'll leave I'll leave a little bit to be. Yeah, no, that's that. I mean, it's fantastic. And you mentioned earlier, not on this podcast, when we were talking outside, that you've also gotten a little bit of a wedge into sports. Can you tell, like, how does that work with Juke? Yeah, we can.
And be like, I want to see so and so score a basket.
Like, so NFL's gonna be a lot different this year. We're gonna be calling the plays. Bad joke. I appreciate it.
No, I got it.
I appreciate it. So last summer, I just bumped into the right guy. He was he was in charge of the Tennessee Titans fan experience, and basically he got wind of us and he said, we've been wanting to do. They have a lot of fan engagement moments.
Sure.
One of the thoughts he and his team have had is like, how do we get more engagement out of our in-venue music?
Okay.
And so that was the original start. And he said, I like what you got. So let's do, he's like, we already do the song battle. I like your version is way better. It's interactive. You see the names, we collect data.
Right.
And then he learned about the posting feature we have where people can live submit photos and GIFs and messages. And there's other products out there that do that. They liked ours from the simplicity standpoint, and it's monetizable.
Got it.
And so that was, and so then we said, do we get lucky or is there something here? And kind of that process took over again of like, well, let's talk to other teams. And then felt like, okay, there's something here. And then we started making a concerted effort to sell in that industry. And we've been growing quite nicely, and the pipeline's grown, and people move in and out, and it behaves really nicely. Yeah.
So when you went to that first Tennessee Titans game where Juke was being used,
that was cool.
I imagine you were feeling a little anxiety. What did anything happen that surprised you? Did it get used in a way that you weren't anticipating because the venue had changed?
So we had been meticulously planning with them. I mean, maybe not meticulously, but we'd gone through. We knew it was going to happen.
Pretty detailed. Yeah,
we knew it was going to happen in that first preseason game, and we decided we were going to do 2 song battles, and that would be that.
Okay.
And each game we were going to do a little more. And it surprised me in the fact that it worked. It worked great. It didn't break, and it was really well utilized by the fans.
That's great.
And so I'm in the production booth, which is crazy, by the way. Like the amount they have going on is it's so cool. There's probably 30 people stuffed into a room, not much bigger than this.
Wow.
And so many of the people in the room hadn't seen Juke. They didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
And it was the first time they were seeing this piece of fan engagement. And, just kind of under their breath, a handful of people go, oh, wow, that's really cool. Oh, that's cool. And I was like, oh, this is.
You're just going like, yes.
Exactly. And then, but
that's great.
We stayed consistent with that every single home game. Same thing. We brought in more elements, but that was, and then we worked with the Titans during the season, mostly on the back end for the people using the back end of the software, just usability. Hey, this is a little clunky. Could we make it easier?
Got it.
And it was great. So we were able to improve our product to fit that need. And it was surprising how it also fit with some of the things we were doing on the music side when we got into the opportunity to work with a bigger production.
Right. That's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So let's circle back to the South Bend question real quick. So you lived here, you loved it here. You moved to Nashville because the market was different and better for the work that you were doing.
Yeah, just connect. You wanted to make those connections. Build relationships.
So I do imagine the personal connections are important, right? Because you have at least the artist has to sign on to this, right? The audience, it's okay, right? They can show up and have the choice to engage or not, but the artist has to want to do this.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So when you went to Nashville, you just had access to more
Well,
more artists?
Yeah, I mean,
it was
there's proximity
easier,
there.
Shake hands and
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you got the labels there, management, agents, artists. So, I was also learning of, is this even possible at the, outside of a, brewery?
Right.
And thinking about business model implications, like, could we go through management? Could we go through an agency?
Yeah.
What does a label think of this? And I had a lot of learning because I hadn't really ever spoken to any of them. So it was important for, I think, two reasons. One, to learn the priorities and the problems and challenges that each different group has, and how do they view what we're doing? And then, of course, if they view it positively, could we get a customer? And so, it was really specific to Nashville of getting that of the learning of the music industry and the learning of and the relationships there, just because of the proximity.
Yeah. So it sounds like in some ways you actually did use South Bend as sort of a beta test site, right? A beta city, which I know came up a couple times when Pete was mayor.
Yep.
And they were able to take those learnings to a bigger market and then sort of apply what you had learned here and then have to expand and learn more. Or
what? I don't know if I'd quite phrase it like that, just because South Bend was far more than a beta city for us. I mean, it was not that. It just doesn't have music industry here. So I was really supplementing everything I got here with the relationships in the industry down there. But everything from fundraising, my earliest angels were almost all people either like my former bosses or board of directors or investors in these different companies. Yeah. Everybody I was building with or like building an early product with was someone I had a relationship here. So these weren't beta, like, it helped me, but it was not this is a testing ground and then on to bigger and better things. I
very much appreciate that because, I think we've moved away from thinking of South Bend as a beta city.
Yep.
That said, it is a great city to start something new where people and people know you and you can kind of get some traction.
And, I like it as an and it's a great term. And we're still working in South Bend in that way. In fact, we've got a big kind of real beta city initiative that we're working on now. It's an opportunity to innovate as well, because we think there's economic growth that we can impact through live music in a region if we're able to sort of align the various city and key like business stakeholders to say, hey, we all value quality of place.
Yeah.
We think live music is a great pillar of quality of place. It's an audacious goal and it can't just be done with tech, but I think we can, we're trying to align these parties and say, look, if we all kind of align around this interest, there's a possibility we can really like improve the live music scene here and the economy through that.
Okay, so hold on. What is the audacious goal?
I would say could you create a self-sustaining like ecosystem of live music here? Basically, can you elevate the demand for live music, having more of it, kind of a live show in every corner type situation? Doesn't have to look like Nashville, but let's have more like, how can we de-risk things for venues, de-risk for promoters, bring in new types of shows that we might not ordinarily have, because if you're a promoter, you have to take the risk. What are you going to do?
Right.
You do something kind of a tried and true, like I know I'm going to get my money back on that, or hopefully return a profit. Or you take a risk. It's far harder to take a risk. And then there's not really been a software that can collect data, kind of like amplify existing shows, kind of give the general citizen like one spot to shop for all their live music. Then if they go to a show, collect their data. Also learn about their interest of like, hey, what music would you like to see?
Yeah.
Now we can start booking those new artists. And so there's a whole, could you kind of install this software ecosystem to help drive demand,
Yeah.
Also book artists, also learn about the needs of a community. It's a whole story. But like I said, it's an audacious goal. It's almost too hard to summarize.
Audacious is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, actually, a lot of your journey has been pretty audacious in a way, right? You're not a music guy or a tech guy, and yet you now have started this amazing company that's heavily in both spaces. I mean, I have a couple more questions there, but so, living in Nashville now and looking back at South Bend and thinking about other entrepreneurs and startups working in this region, it's not just South Bend, Elkhart, right? The entire region. Like, what are you seeing, and what do you think could we improve on here in this region to keep recruiting or keeping, especially our maybe more creative entrepreneurs in this region? Because we're not known as a super cutting edge creative place, although there is plenty going on here. What are your thoughts?
So the 10 years I was here, I mean, I would have never done this had it not been for all of the steps and of people pushing venture entrepreneurship in the community. That I would have left after graduating business school and gone back to probably Dallas, but I stayed because Gary Juke and Joe Urbany were starting this company, and was like, that's really cool. I think, and I'd gotten the entrepreneurship bug while in business school here. And then you've got, the folks at Graham Allen, the investment of Notre Dame, but and just, leaving out, I'm sure, a million things, but it was just... Sure,
but there was an ecosystem that you...
Max Brickman even of starting the Heartland Ventures was really important for me as well, because he started getting ties to San Francisco and these other markets. I ended up working for a company that he'd invested in, so I was now get it. And so I was then working with an SF company, but in South Bend, and we were selling to different manufacturing partners. And so like all those 10 years, it started connecting the city, both with resources here that were right here and local, and whether it was funding or otherwise that were helpful.
Sure.
But then we also started getting touch points into these sort of major, tech hubs or whatnot through the efforts of that. And that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And so when I look at what's maybe missing now, into your questions, I just think it's been growing and it's been improving substantively, and all the resources I needed to grow this business were right here from Notre Dame and from South Bend, and Elevate Ventures was essential.
Yeah.
And I think, I hear just sort of anecdotally, it gets to kind of quality of place. I think that's a big piece. I constantly it's like, well, I don't want my kids, to come back. Or, you try to recruit someone, you come in, and maybe after 9 months they go, it doesn't, and they maybe leave, or their quality of life. And so I think the next evolution is just continuing to lead, and big improvements have been made there, but continuing to push the quality of place. I think is just what people tend to say. I love living here. I think you wanted to, and I think there was a nice piece that South Bend did of there's so much here, but you just kind of had to broaden your radius a little bit, get into Southwest Michigan and go over to Elkhart and go a little down, but everything's here.
Yeah. We hear a lot. One of the favorite things that people have about the region is the ability to get engaged relatively quickly. It's not so it's not so big that you can't get to know folks and you can't make change happen, but it's not so small that there aren't resources. Yeah. So a kind of a nice size market in that sense. And it sounds like that worked for you.
Oh yeah.
And that actually did allow you to grow this company.
Yeah. And we're not, I left for most of my time was spent in Nashville, but knock on wood, as we grow in the next round, the South Bend my plan is to have basically our core base of operations here. I think we're still going to need touch points to the major markets, and we just made our first engineering hire today.
Yeah. Tell us about
South Bend woman graduating from the Esteem program. She'd, and again, these touch points, right, to San Francisco and some of these other markets. Sure. So she had interned with the venture studio that Juke is a part of.
Got it.
Based out of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And she applied. I interviewed her, really liked her. We would have gone through a longer interview process, but I spoke to, my co-founders essentially at Platform Venture Studio, and they said she's the best we've ever had. Like
because they knew her
because they knew her
internship.
Exactly. They said she's the best. Don't talk to anyone else. If she's interested, hire her. Do what we can to get her. And the other great thing, go ahead.
And she just graduated or is graduating from the Notre Dame
in May,
Esteem program.
From the Esteem program, yeah.
And is she going to work here?
Yeah, she's going to work here. She wanted to stay, which is really cool. She's like my network's here, my life is here.
Right.
She liked living here.
Yeah.
And then the city made it easy. So she's not from here. The city, I guess, has a program that I need to learn more about, but essentially it will help us with the costs of whatever the, visa situation
like
is.
an immigrant assistance program.
Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Which is great because without that resource, probably couldn't hire her because the economics and probably don't work out.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing that you might be able to eventually move your base of operations back to South Bend, which is fantastic because I can understand the draw of the bigger cities where the music scene actually is strongest, where the labels are, where the artists are, where the connections are. So, the idea that you could still have that but still be based in South Bend at the same time is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And that's that's a model that I've seen that I really like. I mentioned this company from San Francisco that I worked for a little bit, and they quickly have yes, they have a office in San Francisco, but their real headcount is in these other cities like in Utah and I think Provost and they have one offshore somewhere. But it's like just makes sense economically. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes sense in a lot of ways, and I also think it would. We happen to have the fortune of music and sports are kind of cool.
Yep.
And it just seems like a fun, goal of to just have a tech company with a cool industry, with a cool office right outside of Notre Dame in South Bend. And it just seems like, that's, if things go well, it could be kind of a really cool marquee company that's like, hey, there's, you don't have to squint at it to go like, oh, that's,
and 100%. And you can also imagine a company like that spawning imitators, not direct competitors, but someone who's inspired by the work that you're doing and that Juke is doing, and say, well, if Griff can do it, and if Juke can be in South Bend, then
anybody can do it.
Something else can be in South Bend.
Yep.
Yeah. What advice would you give? Kind of a generic question here, but you have some retrospective vision at this point, looking back. There are younger entrepreneurs out here in the community, people graduating from the Esteem program, graduating from high school, graduating from college. What would you say to them? Because you seem like a great story of someone who just did it anyway.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
So the worst vice is advice. I like that line. I think I heard from somewhere at one point. But I don't know. The thing I kept doing was just telling people about the idea, telling people where I was and working on it, and just doing it, just taking the next step. In my previous ideas I'd had of a startup and, working on different things with McCloskey with teams, we do stuff, but we spent more time talking and working on the business plan than doing something that actually mattered. And so this time, the irony was mentally, it was like, I don't, McCloskey's here, but it was like, I'm going to pretend McCloskey doesn't exist at all. And I'm just going to I'm going to apply or, but I'm just going to cram in the last, 2 minutes to get it done and submit whatever needed to be done. And the tremendous irony is we end up winning this year as opposed to the previous years where I spent far more time thinking about whatever business model piece.
Okay. No, that's it actually.
Because that gives you a story to tell. And that's why it's so a wrap, but it's just, then when you talk to, whether it's an investor, another customer, and whomever it is, you go, this is what we did last time. This is what we've done. This is what I've learned. This is what I still don't know.
So the story is not that you won the competition, but the story is that you.
Oh yeah, nothing. Yeah.
You prioritize working over creating a presentation for the pitch.
Exactly. And because it was just like, well, what's the next thing? I have this idea.
Yeah.
Does anyone else care about requesting songs? So I talked to a bunch of my friends.
Yeah.
And then do artists care? So I talked to them.
Yeah.
And they seemed to care. And then I was like, all right, well, how do I fake it?
Yeah.
And then I faked it. I was like, wow, that went well. Can I make it?
Yeah.
How do I make it? I talked to Ryan, he did it, and then we do that. And so it was just, I kept convincing myself it was worth taking the next step because of the actions I'd taken.
Right.
As opposed, and yeah, I'd glanced, you look at the market, has anyone else done this? And you got some other thinking to do, of course, but I feel like the cerebral strategy of it is less important than just taking some tangible next step.
Well, and I think that's that is advice, I guess, right? You're not being specific, but the idea of prioritizing work over planning in some ways, and taking the next best
sharing
step.
It.
Sharing.
Because I told everybody about this who would listen.
Yeah.
And basically the first $375K round raised for the angel round, I really didn't pitch anybody. It was like a number of people had said, I have an angel check that if you do this, and I was like, I don't even know what this is yet. So that was only happened because I told
I've seen this happen a few times. Were you ever worried when you were telling everybody the story that someone was going to steal your idea?
No. I mean, if they do, they do. It's so what?
And that tends to be my attitude too. It
all comes down to execution.
I lean more on the side of no, just put it out there in the world.
Yeah.
Because you keep it to yourself.
It comes down to execution. And if there, there's other people in our space now doing similar things, and if you're not, you gotta, you just can't. You're gonna the benefit you gain from just sharing it. Because I had a number of people say, whether I mentioned the check example because it's important, but. Early customers, you need to talk to my friend who's in the music industry, or my friend who's an artist, or whatever it was, a venue, and just share that. And so-and-so might want to work for you. And so just by sharing it, almost everybody I told had something they could help, something they could offer to help me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Almost everybody,
so
almost without fail.
Almost everyone
almost without fail. Yeah, I mean, that was a huge part of I guess because I was, even Ryan, I was telling Ryan about it.
Right.
I figured it would be like, all right, now I got to talk to the next person to find it.
Right. You didn't expect him to say it.
And he goes, no, I'll do it.
I'll do it. Yeah.
How's it go?
Fantastic.
Okay. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. What a benefit. Right. And that, I guess that goes back to maybe some of the benefits of being in a smaller community too, where you can sit down and have that conversation. Next thing you know, the guy's doing the coding for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's something special. Yeah.
Well,
Griff, thank you so much for sharing this journey. I don't know where we are in time. Yeah, we're getting a little bit close, but I'm just everything about the journey is so interesting because of the way you started, because you just followed an idea and just consistently took the next best step forward, and you've built it into this thing. And you also seem like you're very open to opportunities, or to your curiosity is alive and well.
Yeah.
And you're bringing that to the work that you're doing. And even going into the sports, like, okay, I wonder what's next for Juke, actually. I mean, I imagine you still have plenty of expansion to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. By no means are we there. We're pushing, the phrase, we pushing the rock uphill every day. I mean, it's hard. There's ebbs and flows. And, Tim Connors is always saying, smarts, goodness, and grit. And the grit piece is, it's on display every day.
Yeah.
It's there every day. It needs to be.
And nice. One of the things I like about Juke is that you put the control in the hands of the artists, right? Yep. So they get to pick the songs. They're like, you're not going to force me to play Hotel California for the 10 millionth time, right? I'm gonna curate the list of songs I'm willing to play, and the audience can interact with that, which is, I love that. I love that. Artists sometimes feel, I think, disconnected or maybe put upon a little bit, and this kind of gives the control back to them in that setting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we're just trying to give them another tool. Yeah, and we're to solve a couple of their biggest problems, which is essentially growing your fan base is incredibly difficult. Yeah. And number two is revenue, and you really have only two revenue streams for most artists, and it's merch, and it's like their ticket sales or tips. And so it's like playing live or merch, not CDs, not streaming.
Right.
And so if we can we can help, we think, with that piece. And it's like, well, when you're performing, this is essentially you're performing to customers, essentially. Yeah. They don't necessarily look at it that way, but it's like we want to have, and you don't need to look at it that way. It's fine. Let us do the
Right.
You all can invite
You
them
call
in.
them whatever you need to call them.
Yeah, and you invite them in. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a request. Now we're pushing the envelope on just, well, what would you like to learn? Or like maybe you've got some unreleased music that, you're playing for the first time and you want some feedback, like precise feedback on it. Almost like a stand-up comedian working on their act. Well, but in doing that, I get your email. And so now I can keep marketing myself to you and share my new single when it drops. And so I grow my CRM as I'm performing and maybe hopefully make a new revenue stream as well.
I think one of the interesting things for me thinking about it too is that oftentimes it can feel like technology is distancing us from authenticity. And in the case of Juke, it feels like you're using technology to make a connection.
I think so.
At least a somewhat authentic connection.
Yeah.
As authentic as you can given the circumstances, right?
Yep.
Like you're not going to be in the artist's living room, but you are able to kind of share this back and forth with them.
Absolutely. And, it's light. There's no app to download. You're not having to, you're kind of in and out of the app, and you learn, you see what you need to. If you want to get more information and find their Instagram or their Spotify, you can. If you want to read their description that they've put in, you can.
Yeah.
But then you're out of it and you're back. In fact, in some of the places where requests are really encouraged, in a venue where requests are really encouraged and they even make it easy. Maybe you're writing them on a piece of paper.
Sure.
It's actually faster to do Juke because it's hard to write like songs out of thin air, and I want to make these requests and write them down. It takes time. You got to pull up Spotify, you do other things.
Yeah.
But if you just pull up the list that they've curated, you just see, and you might want to hear Hotel California, but you don't see it there. But there's 5 other songs that you see that you like.
Right.
So you're back in the show.
Yeah, I went to a concert like that recently where there was basically a hat at the door, and you could write a name of a song that you liked on a slip and put it in the hat, and then towards the end of the show, the artist just took the hat up on stage and just reached in and
that's cool.
Picked whatever song came out, and she said, "Oh, I haven't played this one in a while. Let's give it a try."
And see, I like that because it's you get that spontaneity.
Yes,
and it's an opportunity for the artist to be a little vulnerable. We all know she's. And I think you said she is being vulnerable in this instance because it's like, well, I haven't played this in a while. Here it goes. And I think we all like that. Someone being like a little brave that maybe it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
The downside of that is she didn't get anybody's contact information to grow. And, a lot of people, some people know, go as a fan, but many people don't. I don't know what percentage of, know, but it's like, that's huge. And you want to, as an artist, ideally, you want to be in control of that. You don't just want to have followers. You want to be able to do outbound.
Sure.
But there's something so lovely about the hat so that's.
It was a nice moment.
Yeah.
And I'm presumably she can take that information back and collate it herself, right? She can go through and say, what was the most popular song in the hat, right?
Yep. And maybe
that takes some work on her part.
On it or something.
Yeah, I don't think in this case there was, you could have, but it wasn't part of the effort.
Yep.
But anyway, I love it, and I want to go to a concert that's using Juke. So I'm going to go on your website. Actually, you have a website, right, that lists all the upcoming concerts?
Yep. Juke.band, B-A-N-D.
Juke.band. And are you all over the Midwest? Are you all over the country at this point?
Yeah, I'd say we're national. We've got our sort of DIY artists that sign up that all their shows end up all over the site. And I think we have a lot in Arizona and Texas right now, and Florida. We have one artist who I'm always jealous of every time I see her come through because she's always playing in Key West or the Virgin Islands.
Okay. She's got it figured out.
Yeah. And then we've got kind of our more corporate clients or enterprise clients, like the sports teams and stuff, and you just happen upon those when you go to the games.
Right.
We still have a small footprint, but
those are part of that experience, built into those experiences.
Yeah, and they have the app functions differently for them than it does for a smaller artist.
Yeah.
In some ways, the experience kind of modifies to the different occasions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Griff, again, thank you for coming on. I'm glad you were in town. I know you're in town for Idea Week, which you're part of the planning for.
Yep.
Excellent. It's been a joy to be on that committee with you.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to get you here in person in the studio for this podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. That's great.